A sister's secret and a town's fury ignite a battle of fire and ice in Dust Hollow. Snow cascaded over Dust Hollow like a widow's lament, thick and unyielding, cloaking the town's jagged wounds. It splintered fences, it shuttered storefronts, its church steeple bent like a broken vow. Each flake fell with purpose, as if the sky ached to bury the place, to silence its whispers of greed, betrayal, and faded hopes. The air was sharp, biting skin through threadbare cloth, and the hills beyond stood like silent judges, their peaks veiled in mist that seemed to pulse with secrets. A train wailed into the station, its wheels screeching against ice-crusted tracks, steam rising like spirits escaping into the dawn. The platform was a wasteland. No lanterns flickered, no voices called. Only the wind's mournful howl answered, carrying the train's lonely whistle deep into the frost-choked valley. Two figures stepped from the last car, their boots sinking into the snow, their breaths weaving fragile threads in the cold. Sisters, Aria and Sage, close in spirit but distinct in form. Aria, 22, with chestnut hair braided loose, freckled cheeks, and green eyes sharp as moss under twilight. Sage, 20, with darker brown hair tied back, pale skin, and gray eyes that held a quiet storm. Aria moved with a fire that could warm a soul or scorch it bare, her chin high, her hands restless, while Sage stepped softer, her gaze catching on shadows, like she heard a melody carved into the stillness. Aria dropped her bag first, a tattered satchel stitched with desperation, and scanned the empty platform, her breath a defiant plume. "This is Dust Hollow," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut the wind. Sage lingered behind, her own bag clutched tight, its leather cracked from years of carrying their lives. Scraps of cloth, a chipped spoon, a Bible with pages worn soft. Her fingers brushed something in her coat pocket, a small, cold weight she hadn't shown Aria. "I can't. Not yet," she thought, her heart fluttering like a trapped sparrow. They'd come because of Aria's letters, pinned in the dim glow of their Kentucky shack, where hunger gnawed like an old friend. "We got no coin, no name, just hands that build and hearts that endure," Aria had written, every word a dare to dream beyond their poverty. Two ranchers had answered, brothers, they'd claimed, seeking wives to share a life in Dust Hollow's wilds. Aria had read their replies to Sage, her eyes alight with possibility, painting a future of warm hearths and full plates. But now, the platform was a frozen grave, and the sisters stood alone, their shawls frayed against the storm, their hopes fraying faster. A man shuffled past, his coat patched with mud, his eyes narrow as slits. He spat into the snow near Aria's boots, the glob glistening like a curse before it froze. "Beggars," he growled, loud enough to echo, his voice dripping with scorn. Aria's hand twitched toward the knife in her belt, its handle worn smooth from years of protecting them both. But Sage stepped close, her touch light as a feather but strong as iron. "Don't, Aria," she whispered, her voice steady yet strained, like a string pulled taut. Aria's fist unclenched, but her eyes blazed, hot enough to melt the ice. They turned, catching townsfolk staring from doorways, their faces hard as the frost creeping up the sisters' boots. Whispers slithered through the air, drifters' trouble should have stayed gone. Aria's jaw locked tight, her teeth aching, but Sage's gaze drifted to the hills, where the mist seemed to writhe, like something was watching, waiting. "What's out there?" Aria thought, a chill snaking down her spine, sharper than the cold. A clerk trudged toward them, his badge tilted, his scowl deeper than the snowdrifts piling against the station. "You the sisters?" he asked, barely glancing up, his voice flat as the gray sky. Aria nodded, her spine straight as a rifle barrel. "Aria and Sage," he snorted, wiping his nose with a gloved hand. "Your men backed out, so they ain't chaining themselves to no penniless strays." Sage's breath caught, sharp and small, like a thread snapping. Aria's voice stayed firm, though her hands trembled inside her mittens, betraying the fire she fought to contain. We crossed mountains for this. We deserve a chance. The clerk's laugh was a blade, cold and quick, slicing through their hope. Chance? Dust Hollow don't give alms. Get back on that train, for you freeze solid. He tipped his hat, a mocking twist, and shuffled off, his steps muffled by the snow's weight, leaving the sisters in a silence that stung worse than his words. The platform cleared fast. Shop doors slammed. Windows darkened, curtains twitching like nervous eyes. The sisters stood rooted, snow piling past their ankles, their bags heavier now with the weight of broken promises. Aria's chest burned. She'd sworn to Sage they'd find a home, a place to belong. And here they were, cast out before they'd even unpacked their dreams. Sage stared at the ground, her fingers fidgeting in her pocket, tracing that hidden weight. A locket, small and silver, its surface etched with a spiral that seemed to shift when no one looked. What's she holding? Aria thought, the question a thorn under her skin, pricking deeper with every glance. We're not giving up, Aria said, her voice rough but resolute, like a fire refusing to die. Sage nodded, but her silence felt heavy, like she carried a truth Aria couldn't see, a shadow that stretched beyond the snow. They walked through Dust Hollow's heart, past saloons where laughter died as they passed, past storefronts where eyes tracked them like wolves circling prey. The cold gnawed their cheeks, turning their breath to frost, but Aria's fire kept their steps steady, her hand brushing Sage's arm to anchor them both. Sage stayed quiet, her boots careful, like she was treading on glass, or walking toward a fate she couldn't name. Dusk fell like a stone, the wind turning the snow into a swarm of tiny blades that stung their faces. They wandered the town's edges, searching for shelter, their fingers numb, their hope thinning with every closed door. At the far end of Dust Hollow, they found a crumbling church, its roof sagging like a broken wing, its walls scarred by a fire that had left it hollow but standing. The air inside smelled of ash and sorrow, of prayers long abandoned, but it was a shield against the storm's teeth. Aria knelt by a corner, striking a flint with shaking hands until a spark caught on damp twigs scavenged from the pews. The fire was small, flickering like a heartbeat fighting to hold on, casting shadows that danced across the charred walls, twisting into shapes that felt too alive, hands reaching, eyes watching. Sage sat close, her bag between her knees, her eyes catching the flame's glow, reflecting a sorrow Aria couldn't place. "Why didn't you tell me about the letters?" Sage asked, her voice soft but pointed, like a needle finding its mark through cloth. Aria froze, her hands still over the fire, the flint cold against her palm. "You'd have stopped me. Said it was foolish, like always." Sage's gaze sharpened, gray eyes glinting like wet stone. "Maybe I was right." The words cut deep, sharper than the wind outside, and Aria's stomach knotted, a mix of guilt and suspicion. "What's she keeping from me?" They shared a crust of bread, stale but sacred, splitting it with careful fingers, savoring each crumb as if it were their last. The church groaned under the storm's weight, its beams creaking like old bones, and something scratched outside, slow, deliberate, not just a branch dragged by the wind. Aria's hand slid to her knife, its handle a familiar comfort, her pulse quickening like a drum. Sage's eyes flicked to the door, then back to her bag, her fingers twitching. "It's nothing," she said, but her voice trembled, thin as ice over a river ready to crack. Aria didn't buy it, her senses sharp, every sound a warning. The firelight caught a flash in Sage's hand. A silver locket, no bigger than a sparrow's egg, its surface carved with a spiral that seemed to pulse in the glow, alive in a way that made Aria's skin prickle. "What's that?" Aria asked, her voice sharper than she meant, suspicion creeping in. Sage's fingers closed around it, shoving it back into her bag with a haste that felt like guilt. "Something Mama left me," she mumbled, her eyes avoiding Aria's. Before she died, Aria's heart twisted. Mama's death was a wound they rarely touched. 13 years old but still raw, a grave of dirt and dandelions they'd left behind in Kentucky. Why hide it? Why now? Sleep came fitful, the cold seeping through their shawls, the fire barely enough to warm their hands. Aria woke in the night to Sage whispering, not to her, but to the Locket, words like a prayer or a plea. "Keep us safe, hold us close, don't let it come." Aria crept closer, her breath shallow, her bare feet silent on the stone floor. Sage's fingers traced the Locket's spiral, her lips moving, her eyes half closed, like she was caught in a dream that wasn't hers. A board creaked under Aria's step, and Sage's head snapped up, her hand flying to her chest, hiding the Locket. "Why were you sneaking?" she hissed, her voice a tangle of fear and accusation. "You're scaring me," Aria said, honest now, her own fear rising like a tide. "What's that thing, Sage? Why's it got you like this?" Sage's face softened, her lips parting as if to speak, but she swallowed the words, curling into her blanket, the Locket tucked close. Aria lay back, staring at the ceiling where shadows writhed like secrets, her mind racing. What was the Locket, and why did it feel like it was pulling Sage away? Morning dawned gray, the snow piled high against the church's broken doors, trapping them in a cocoon of cold. They patched their shawls with thread from Sage's bag, their fingers stiff but steady, working in silence that felt louder than words. Aria tried to talk, to bridge the gap, asking about their old home, their mother's songs, but Sage's answers were short, her eyes distant, like she was listening to something far away. They ventured into town, their cheeks raw from windburn, their coins nearly gone. At the general store, they bought oats, a candle, and a sliver of soap, the last of their money spent with care. The shopkeeper stared, his wife muttering loud enough to wound. "Heard they're here to trap good men," she said, her tongue a whip cracking through the air. "No shame left in coming here with nothing but rags." Aria's hands shook as she paid, rage boiling under her skin, hot enough to scald. Sage stayed calm, too calm, her fingers brushing the Locket in her pocket, her face a mask Aria couldn't read. What's it mean to her? Aria wondered, the question a splinter digging deeper, drawing blood. Back at the church, Sage pulled the Locket out, holding it to the weak daylight filtering through a cracked window. "Mama said it's protection," she said, her voice barely above a breath, like she was afraid the words would break. "Said it holds a promise." Aria leaned closer, her suspicion softening into worry. "Protection from what, Sage?" Sage's lips parted, then closed, her eyes clouded with a fear that made Aria's chest ache. "I don't know yet," she said, and the lie hung between them, fragile but sharp. That afternoon, Aria explored the church, finding a trapdoor under a pew, its hinges rusted but intact. She pried it open, revealing a crawl space filled with cobwebs and a single tin box, dented and cold. Inside was a faded ribbon, blue, like the ones Mama used to tie their hair, and a note in a stranger's hand. "The debt comes due." Aria's blood ran cold. She showed it to Sage, whose face paled, her hand flying to her Locket. "It's nothing," Sage said, too quick, but her voice cracked, and Aria knew it was something big. The second night, Aria woke to a hum, low and strange, like a song rising from the earth itself, coming from Sage's bag. She waited, heart pounding, until Sage slept, her breaths slow and uneven. Aria opened the bag, her fingers trembling, and found the Locket, its spiral faintly glowing, warm to the touch. She held it, and a jolt hit her, a vision of a woman in black, her face hollow as bone, her eyes voids that swallowed light. One life for the dead. The woman hissed, her voice like wind through a graveyard, pointing at Sage with a skeletal hand. Aria dropped the locket, gasping, her hands burning as if she'd touched fire. Sage stirred, murmuring, "No, not yet, please." Aria's fear grew, rooting deep. What had Mama done, and why was Sage carrying it alone? The third day broke with hoofbeats, loud against the snow's hush, shattering the church's quiet. Two riders emerged from the mist, their coats crusted with ice, their faces weathered but open, like men who'd seen hard days but hadn't let them win. The taller one, Elias, dismounted first, his boots sinking deep, his presence steady as stone. His eyes were warm but guarded, a scar tracing his jaw like a map of battles fought and survived. "I'm Elias," he said, his voice low but clear, carrying over the wind. "This is my brother, Finn." Finn, younger, with a lopsided grin that lit the gray morning, tipped his hat, his hair curling under the brim. "Heard what the town did," Elias went on, his gaze settling on Aria, then Sage. "Leaving you out here ain't right. Ain't human." Aria crossed her arms, her knife a cold weight against her hip, her trust worn thin by betrayal. "Why do you care?" she asked, her voice sharp, testing him. Elias met her gaze, unflinching, his eyes holding a story he didn't tell. "I've been cold before, left with nothing. Didn't like it then, don't like it now." Finn tossed a wool blanket to Sage, who caught it, her fingers brushing his, a spark of warmth in the cold. "You're shivering," he said, soft as a vow, his grin softening into something real. Sage blushed, wrapping the blanket tight, but her hand stayed near her locket, her eyes flickering with doubt. Suspicion swirled like the snow. Could they trust these men, or was this another trap, sweeter but no less deadly? Aria's grip on her knife tightened, her instincts screaming to guard what little they had left. But Elias's voice was steady, Finn's eyes kind, and Sage's nod was quick, too quick, her hand resting on her locket like it held her courage. "They're offering help," Sage said, her voice quiet but firm. Aria hesitated, watching her sister, the question burning. Why she so sure? They followed, climbing behind the brothers on horseback, their bags slung across the saddles, Dust Hollow fading into a white haze as they rode. The ranch, called Dawn's Hollow, was a sprawl of frost-kissed meadows, cedar barns smelling of hay and leather, and a house glowing with firelight, its windows warm against the cold. Inside, bread baked in a stone oven, stew simmered with the scent of thyme, and a kettle whistled on the hearth, promising comfort Aria hadn't felt in years. Her stomach growled, loud enough to make Finn chuckle, but her eyes stayed sharp, scanning every corner, every shadow. Sage set her bag down, the locket hidden again, her fingers lingering where it lay. Finn teased her about her quietness, coaxing a laugh, a sound Aria hadn't heard since they were children, running through Kentucky fields before the world turned hard. Elias led Aria to the porch, the stars bright above, a sky so clear it felt like a gift. "You're welcome here," he said, his voice low, steady. "No strings, no debts." Aria wanted to believe him, to let her guard fall, but trust was a brittle thing, cracked by too many lies. The first night at Dawn's Hollow, Aria lay awake, the house creaking like it held secrets older than its beams. She heard Sage whisper, not to her, but to the locket, words like a chant. "Keep us safe, hold us close, don't let it take us." Aria crept closer, her pulse loud in her ears, her bare feet cold on the wood floor. Sage's fingers traced the locket's spiral, her eyes half closed, like she was caught in a trance, her lips moving in a rhythm that felt wrong, too old for her voice. A floorboard groaned, and Sage's hand flew to her chest, hiding the locket, her breath hitching. "What are you doing?" she snapped, her voice a tangle of fear and guilt, her eyes wide in the dark. "You're scaring me," Aria said, her own fear rising like a tide, drowning her anger. "What's that thing, Sage? Why's it got you like this?" Sage's face softened, her lips parting as if to speak, but she swallowed the words, curling into her blanket, the locket tucked close. Aria lay back, staring at the ceiling where moonlight painted shadows that writhed like ghosts, her mind racing. What was the locket, and why did it feel like it was pulling Sage away? Days passed, and dawn's hollow warmed them, slow but sure, like a fire coaxing life back into frozen hands. Finn taught Sage to mend harnesses in the barn, their hands brushing over leather, their laughter filling the air like music, light and free. Sage's smile came easier, her eyes brighter, but her hand never strayed far from her pocket, the locket a constant weight. Elias showed Aria the fields, their shoulders close as they walked the fences, his voice steady as he spoke of planting seasons, of horses he'd raised, of a sister he'd lost to fever years ago. Aria listened, her knife staying in her pocket more often, her heart softening despite her will to stay hard. They shared meals at a long oak table, the brothers joking over burned biscuits, Sage humming a tune from their childhood, Aria daring to hope this could be home. But the locket's shadow lingered. One afternoon, Aria caught Sage by the creek behind the house, staring at the locket, whispering, "I'm trying, Mama, I swear." Aria's patience snapped, her boots crunching as she approached. "What are you doing?" Sage flinched, hiding the locket, her eyes wide with guilt. "Nothing," she said too quick. Aria grabbed her arm, gentle but firm, her voice low. "You're lying, Sage. Tell me." Sage's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking. "I can't. Not yet." Aria let go, hurt cutting deeper than anger, the distance between them growing like a crack in ice. The town's hatred festered like a wound, growing darker with each passing day. It began with whispers. Children were told to shun the sisters. Shopkeepers spat when they passed. Old women crossed themselves as if Aria and Sage carried plague. Gideon, a rancher with a voice like gravel and hands rough from breaking men as easily as horses, fueled the fire. "Those girls are a curse," he'd say in the saloon, his words slurring with whiskey but sharp with malice. "They'll ruin us, bring ruin to our fields, our homes." His cronies nodded, their eyes glinting with fear and hate, their hands itching for a fight. The enmity wasn't just words. It took shape in small, cruel acts. A note slipped under the church door before they left. "But go, you mout." Manure smeared on the ranch's gate, stinking for days. A dead crow nailed to a fence post, its wings spread, its beak open in a silent scream, blood frozen in the snow. Aria's rage flared, her knife flashing as she cut it down. But Sage retched, her hand on her locket, her face pale as death. "It's her," Sage whispered, meaning the woman tied to the locket, but Aria heard the town's voice in it too. Elias and Finn saw it all, their faces hardening, their rifles never far. "They're cowards," Elias said, his scars stark in the morning light. "But cowards get bold when they're scared." Finn nodded, his grin gone. "We'll watch closer." The town's hostility wasn't the only threat. The locket's curse grew louder, its hum vibrating through the ranch at night, waking Aria with dreams of the woman in black, her skeletal hand reaching, her voice hissing, one life or both. Sage grew quieter, her eyes haunted, her sleep broken by murmurs Aria couldn't catch. One night, Aria found Sage sleepwalking on the porch, the locket open in her palm, glowing bright enough to cast shadows like claws. "Sage, wake up," Aria whispered, shaking her gently. Sage's eyes opened, blank at first, then filled with tears. "She's closer," she said, her voice a ghost's. Aria held her tight, promising they'd fight, but doubt gnawed. Could they win against something that wasn't human? The enmity peaked one frozen evening, a storm brewing in the sky and in the hearts of Dust Hollow's folk. A mob gathered at Dawn's Hollow, their torches painting the snow red, their voices a roar of hate that shook the trees. Gideon led them, his face twisted, his torch raised high, casting shadows that danced like demons. "You brought a curse," he shouted, his words slicing through the wind. "You sisters, you've poisoned our town. Leave, or we'll burn this place to ash." His followers, ranchers, shopkeepers, men with grudges older than the sisters, chanted, their fists clenched, some holding pitchforks, others ropes, their eyes wild with fear turned to fury. Behind them, women whispered, some doubtful, others nodding, their shawls tight against the cold. Aria stepped onto the porch, Sage at her side, the locket heavy in Sage's hand, its glow faint but fierce. Elias flanked Aria, his rifle steady, his jaw set, while Finn stood by Sage, his pistol drawn, his usual grin replaced by a fire that matched Aria's own. The four of them were a wall, unyielding, their bond forged in shared danger. The air crackled with tension, the mob's shouts growing louder, Gideon's torch swinging like a pendulum. Aria spoke first, her voice ringing clear, cutting through the chaos. "We're not your enemy. We came for a life, not your fear." Sage lifted the locket, her voice shaking but strong, her tears glinting in the firelight. "This debt's mine, not yours. Let us end it." Gideon laughed, a cruel bark, and stepped forward, his torch dangerously close. "You think words'll save you? You're nothing." Elias raised his rifle, his voice low, deadly. "Step back, Gideon, or you'll regret it." Finn cocked his pistol, his eyes locked on the mob's front line, his stance protective beside Sage. "We don't want blood," Finn said, "but we'll spill it if you force us." The mob hesitated, some shifting, their courage faltering under the brothers' resolve. But Gideon was relentless, his hatred a fire of its own. He hurled his torch toward the porch, aiming for the wooden steps, the flames catching fast, licking at the dry boards. Aria reacted first, grabbing a blanket from the railing and smothering the fire, her hands singed but steady, her rage fueling her speed. Sage screamed, "No," and tossed a bucket of snow from the porch's edge, dousing the remaining flames, her fear channeled into action. Elias fired a warning shot into the air, the crack echoing, freezing the mob in place. "Next one's not a warning," he growled, his eyes never leaving Gideon. Finn moved forward, pistol raised, shielding Sage as she stepped back, her locket glowing brighter, its hum audible now, like a heartbeat from the earth. The mob's front line wavered, but Gideon rallied them, shouting, "They're witches! Burn 'em out!" Two men, ranchers with faces red from whiskey, charged, one swinging a pitchfork, the other a rope knotted for trouble. Aria drew her knife, her fire blazing, and ducked the pitchfork, slicing the man's sleeve, drawing blood but sparing his life. "Stay down," she hissed, her voice fierce, her eyes daring him to try again. Elias tackled the second man, pinning him to the snow, his rifle pressed to the man's chest. "You done?" Elias asked, his voice calm but lethal. The man nodded, fear replacing his bravado, and scrambled back. Finn faced a third attacker, a shopkeeper with a club, dodging a wild swing and knocking him down with a swift punch, his pistol still trained on the crowd. "We don't want this," Finn said, his voice steady, "but you won't touch them." Sage, trembling but resolute, stood at the porch's edge, the locket raised high, its light pulsing, drawing gasps from the mob. "This isn't your fight," she cried, her voice breaking through the chaos. "It's mine and I'll end it." Her courage sparked something. A woman in the crowd, Clara the seamstress, stepped forward, her voice trembling but sure. "They helped my girl when she was sick, brought her soup when I had none. They're no curse." The baker joined her, his voice gruff. "They gave my boy bread when we had none." "Gideon's wrong." More voices rose, soft at first, then louder, cracking the mob's unity like ice under a boot. Gideon's face twisted, his torch shaking, but his men faltered, their weapons lowering, their eyes darting. Then she came, the woman in black, stepping from the trees, her shadow stretching too long, too wrong, swallowing the light of every torch. Her face was a void, her eyes hollows that pulled at the soul, her presence a cold that burned deeper than winter. The mob froze, their shouts dying, their torches flickering as if afraid. Sage faced her, the locket glowing brighter, its spiral pulsing like a dying star. "Take me," Sage said, her voice breaking, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Leave my sister." Aria grabbed her arm, her fire blazing, her voice fierce. "No, Sage. We're together, always." Elias and Finn closed ranks. Elias's rifle aimed at the shadow, Finn's pistol steady, their faces set with a courage that matched the sisters. "Whatever you are," Elias said, his voice low, "you're not taking them." Finn nodded, his hand brushing Sage's, giving her strength. "We fight as one." The woman's laugh was a blade, sharp enough to cut bone. "One life or both," she hissed, her hand reaching, skeletal fingers curling toward Sage's heart. Aria's knife flashed, useless against the shadow, but her love roared louder, a fire no darkness could touch. Sage looked at Aria, her eyes clear, and nodded. Together, they raised the locket, their hands joined, their bond a flame that burned brighter than fear. Elias and Finn stood firm, their weapons ready, their presence a shield. Aria shouted, "We choose us," and Sage smashed the locket against the porch rail, its light shattering like 1,000 stars, its scream echoing through the valley. The woman in black wailed, a sound that shook the earth, her form unraveling into mist, dissolving into the night, the air clearing like a storm's end, warm and still. Gideon dropped his torch, the flames hissing out in the snow. His men scattered, some running, others standing silent, their faces pale with shame or awe. Clara stayed, her hands clasped, her eyes wet. The baker, the widow, the boy, they joined her, their voices a quiet chorus of support, drowning out the last echoes of hate. Aria and Sage fell into each other's arms, sobbing, their bond unbroken, their tears mixing with the melting snow. Elias and Finn joined them, their hands steady on their shoulders, their eyes soft with pride. "It's done," Elias said, his voice low, a vow kept. Sage nodded, her smile fragile but whole, like a flower pushing through frost. "We're free," she whispered, and Aria felt it too. A weight lifted, a chain broken. Weeks turned to months, and dawns hollow bloomed under their care. Aria and Sage rebuilt with Elias and Finn, planting gardens where wildflowers tangled with rye, raising barns sturdy enough to defy any storm, teaching the horses to run without fear. The town softened, slow but sure. Clara brought thread to mend their dresses. The baker left loaves on their porch. The widow shared seeds from her mother's stock. Gideon stayed away, his ranch quiet, his fire dimmed by shame. Not all forgave, but enough did, their hands open where they'd once been fists. Aria learned to laugh again, her fire tempered by peace, her knife now used to carve apple for the ranch's children, who followed her like ducklings. Sage sang by the creek, her locket gone but her heart full, her quietness now a choice, not a burden. Elias and Aria walked the fields at dusk, their hands brushing, their silences comfortable, their love growing like roots under stone. Finn and Sage danced in the barn, his grin infectious, her steps light, their bond a promise forged in trust. One spring evening, under a sky streaked with pink and gold, the ranch glowed with lanterns strung between cedars, their light dancing on the creek. Aria married Elias, her dress simple but pinned with a sprig of cedar, her laugh bright as the water rippling nearby, her eyes holding as like he was her home. Sage wed Finn, her hair woven with daisies, her voice steady as she spoke her vows, her smile a beacon that made Finn's heart skip. The crowd cheered. Clara, the baker, the widow, even a few who'd once stood with Gideon, their heads bowed, their hearts changed. Children ran through the grass, their giggles a new song for Dust Hollow, a melody of second chances. The horses grazed beyond, their tails flicking, the hills watching like old friends. That night, Aria and Sage sat by the fire, the ranch alive with warmth behind them, the stars a blanket above. Sage held a daisy, twirling it between her fingers, her hand resting in Aria's. "Think Mama's at peace?" she asked, her voice soft, her eyes searching the sky. Aria squeezed her hand, her own eyes tracing the constellations they'd named as girls. Two embers, they'd called them, burning side by side. "She's with us, Sage." "Always," Aria said, her voice steady, her heart full. They smiled, their bond a truth stronger than any curse. Their home a victory carved from pain, love, and fire. This tale's done, but Dust Hollow's hills hold more. Subscribe to hear what's next, because every shadow hides a story, and every ember lights a way.